Israel Dagg has made a surprising admission about Rassie Erasmus, and his comments have added another fascinating layer to an already heated build-up between South Africa and New Zealand. With the Springboks and All Blacks preparing for a massive test battle, the rugby world is already buzzing about tactics, pressure, and the psychological contest that begins long before the players walk onto the field. But this time, the spotlight is not only on the teams. It is firmly on Rassie Erasmus and the way he has once again managed to turn a press conference into part of the wider rugby story. What makes this particularly interesting is that former All Black star Israel Dagg says he is actually enjoying it more and more. That may sound unexpected coming from someone with strong New Zealand rugby connections, but Dagg appears genuinely fascinated by the way Erasmus handles the media, creates discussion, and keeps everyone guessing. And his latest comments came after a press conference that immediately attracted attention across the rugby community. Instead of appearing alone, Erasmus brought former international referee Jaco Peyper with him. Peyper, who spent years officiating at the highest level, is now part of the Springboks coaching setup, giving him unique understanding of the laws, match management, and the small details that can influence the rhythm of a test. His presence was significant because one of the major talking points surrounding the upcoming South Africa versus New Zealand clash has been the accusation that the Springboks could use tactics that slow the game down. The debate quickly became bigger than a simple question about rugby laws. It became a conversation about tempo, momentum, and whether teams can influence the flow of a match without necessarily breaking the rules. And that is where Erasmus appeared to take control of the narrative. Rather than allowing the conversation to develop entirely around the accusations, he brought Peyper into the discussion and offered a technical perspective. For some observers, it was controversial. For others, it was clever. But for Israel Dagg, it was entertaining. Dagg explained that the more he watches Erasmus speaking publicly, the more he finds himself appreciating the South African coach's approach. He was particularly amused by the decision to bring Peyper into the press conference, suggesting that Erasmus knew exactly what line of questioning was coming from the media and had prepared accordingly. To Dagg, there is something almost theatrical about it, and that theater is becoming part of the attraction. It is not simply about what happens during the match anymore. It is about how coaches manage pressure, how they respond to criticism, and how they position their teams before the biggest moments arrive. That is one reason Rassie Erasmus remains such a fascinating figure in international rugby. He understands that a test match can begin psychologically before the first whistle. The questions asked in press conferences, the messages delivered to opponents, and the public debate surrounding a team can all contribute to the atmosphere. And Erasmus has repeatedly shown that he is comfortable operating in that space. However, not everyone sees the strategy in such a positive light. Scotty Stevenson, co-host of the Scotty and Izzy show and a regular critic of Erasmus' media approach, offered a much more skeptical interpretation. Stevenson made it clear that he has no problem with Jaco Peyper being part of the Springboks coaching group. In fact, he acknowledged that Peyper has enormous experience and valuable knowledge after spending so many years as a top-level referee. But Stevenson believes the press conference moved the discussion away from the question that many people actually wanted answered. In his view, the issue is not simply how quickly a lineout is formed or how long it takes for scrum to be set. Those are visible and measurable parts of the game. The bigger question, according to Stevenson, concerns the natural flow of play and whether certain tactics can deliberately disrupt momentum once the match is moving. And this is where his criticism becomes particularly interesting. Stevenson believes Erasmus effectively changed the subject by presenting a technical argument that was easier to address, allowing Peyper to step forward and explain the laws from a referee's perspective.
He described it as a clever diversion, arguing that Erasmus has become extremely skilled at controlling the direction of media conversations. Whether fans agree with that assessment or not, there is no denying that it has created an enormous amount of discussion. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this story so compelling. Erasmus does not simply answer questions. He often turns the questions themselves into another part of the contest. His approach can frustrate opponents, entertain supporters, and leave neutral observers wondering what he will do next. That unpredictability has become one of the defining characteristics of his public persona. But behind all the headlines, there is a much bigger sporting battle waiting to happen. South Africa are the back-to-back world champions, and the All Blacks remain one of the most respected teams in international rugby. When these two sides meet, there is rarely anything ordinary about it. Every collision matters. Every decision is scrutinized. Every tactical adjustment can change the momentum of the match. That is why the conversation about slowing the game down has become so sensitive. Both teams understand how valuable rhythm can be. A fast-moving match can create opportunities, while interruptions and changes in tempo can affect momentum and decision-making. So when questions are raised about game flow before such an important test, it is hardly surprising that emotions rise. Yet Israel Dagg's reaction shows another side of the story. Instead of simply becoming frustrated by Erasmus, he seems increasingly entertained by the entire spectacle. There is almost an appreciation for the way Erasmus has embraced the role of the rugby villain, strategist and media operator all at once. For Dagg, the drama adds something to the rivalry. It gives fans another storyline to follow while the players prepare for the real battle. And that may be why this latest exchange has captured so much attention. Rugby rivalries are not built only on results. They are built on personalities, history, emotion and moments that fans remember long after the final whistle. Rassie Erasmus understands that better than most. He knows how quickly a comment can become a headline and how a press conference can become part of the story itself. At the same time, Scotty Stevenson's criticism reminds us that there is another perspective. What one person sees as clever strategy, another may see as a distraction. What Dagg finds entertaining, Stevenson finds calculated. And that difference of opinion is exactly what makes the debate so interesting. Now the attention turns back to the field. Whatever was said in the press conference, whatever arguments were made and whatever narratives have developed, the players will ultimately have to provide the final answer. When South Africa and New Zealand finally meet, there will be nowhere to hide behind media tactics or clever words. The Springboks will have to execute their game plan, while the All Blacks will look to impose their own style and challenge the world champions. Until then, however, the psychological contest will continue. And if there is one thing Rassie Erasmus has demonstrated once again, it is that he is perfectly comfortable being at the center of that conversation. Israel Dagg may have started out simply watching from the other side of the rivalry, but now he admits he is enjoying the Erasmus show more and more. Scotty Stevenson, meanwhile, remains unconvinced by the tactics behind it. Two very different opinions, one controversial press conference and one enormous test match waiting just around the corner. And perhaps that is the biggest takeaway of all. Before South Africa and New Zealand even step onto the field, the battle for attention, pressure and perception has already begun. Now the only question is whether the drama surrounding Rassie Erasmus will remain a talking point once the real rugby begins, or whether the Springboks and All Blacks will create an even bigger story on the field.